Now, the Prime Minister has backed Jacob Rees-Mogg's back to the office push after a cabinet colleague reportedly called it Dickensian. Downing Street said it supported the drive to get more civil servants back to the office, with Mr Rees-Mogg leaving notes on desks with the message, "Sorry you were out when I visited. I look forward to seeing you in the office very soon." Hardly intimidating at all. Although, frankly, if you're intimidated by that, you need to get a spine. Last week, he gave a presentation to the Cabinet that included a league table showing the government departments where the fewest staff had returned to work. Nadine Dorries, the Culture Secretary, reportedly objected to Rees-Mogg's plan, saying there's a whiff of something Dickensian about it. Why are we measuring bodies behind desks? Why aren't we ensuring productivity? So the number to call to give your view, are you on Team Nadine or Team Jacob? 0345 6060 973. Well, joining me to discuss this are Sarah Jackson, Visiting Professor at the Cranfield School of Management and former CEO of Working Families, and Russell Quirk, property entrepreneur and commentator. And my producer's helpfully then written, "Fight, fight, fight." Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to have an educated discussion. Sarah, let's start with you. Now, you are on Team Nadine. Just explain why.
Yes, I'm surprised to find myself on Team Nadine, but here I am. Basically because Jacob Rees-Mogg's ideas about what make a good, successful boss are as outdated as his fashion sense. You know, he is absolutely Dickensian. He's talking about an old-fashioned way of measuring performance. I mean, I think if you're a boss who says, "I don't know what you're doing if I can't see you," I think if you have any problems with motivation, any problems with performance, those problems are all on you because you don't know how to run your people properly.
But isn't it right for if an employer decides that the best thing for their business is for employees to be in the office, if not full-time, maybe 4 days a week, surely an employer has a right to demand that?
Absolutely, of course you do. But it's up to you to sit down with your people and work out what is going to enable them to do their best work for you. Because you've just said it, this isn't about working full-time from home. This is about saying, we would like you to be in the office a certain number of days a week. And the best way to do that is to be very clear about what has to be done, when it has to be done by, and to what standard it has to be done. And then all the research evidence and all the real-life employer evidence says you then butt out. You stand back and you say, Now you know what I want you to do. You work out the best way of doing that. So you as the boss set the parameters, you set the non-negotiables, and then you give people choice and control, and they will perform better for you.
But as I understand it, the problem here is that many civil servants are working 5 days a week from home and are just refusing to come back to the office.
Well, that's a management problem. You know, if that is honestly the case, then the manager needs to sit down and say, is this a job that can be done full-time from home? Now, there are around about 20% of the workforce would like to work full-time from home, having had the experience of doing so through the pandemic. It's not always going to be the case that those jobs will be doable full-time from home. There are issues around collaboration, there are issues around team cohesion, there are issues around inducting new people and creating team spirit. But it's got to be done together. You know, you can't treat people like children and say, because you're stamping your foot and saying, I'm not going to come in, I'm going to stamp my foot and be quite childish back the way. This has got to be grown-ups sitting down and say, what's the best way to deliver the services that we're here to deliver?
Russell Quirk, what Sarah said seems eminently sensible and reasonable, doesn't it?
Well, apart from the fact that, of course, people that work for other people, whether it be in the public sector or the private sector, don't have the God-given right just to decide where they work all of a sudden. So we've had this kind of hiatus for 2 years where there's been a necessity with regard to working from home. And why it's got into people's heads now that should become a permanent fixture, I really don't know. It's obviously not in the employment contracts of the vast majority of the people, whether it be public sector or private sector. So I think, you know, I support Jacob Rees-Mogg, frankly, on the basis that not only do people not have the right to simply work from home or anywhere else, but let's be frank and clear here. This is a focus on the public sector. So we can muddy the waters by talking about people generally working from home. But this is Jacob Rees-Mogg in his role in government, talking about the question of where the public sector, where civil servants work. Now, my experience, I'm afraid, the public sector is that they are are generally less efficient than the private sector, and that's backed up by data. So, for instance, where sickness is concerned and days lost through industrial action. So I think if we want our public sector, public servants that are paid by the taxpayer to be accountable and to be efficient and to do the job that they are paid by the taxpayer to do, I think we have, as taxpayers, every right to expect those people to come into the office. But not only that, when we talk about productivity, Iain, it's not just about measuring someone on a kind of abacus or on some computer program every day as to how efficient they are. When it comes to getting face-to-face, bearing in mind we are social animals, there's a human factor to this, we should be thinking about such things as motivation and culture. Now, you can't promote culture in a business through Zoom calls or the telephone, or motivation for that fact. When you get together, particularly in creative industries and industries where brainstorming and so on is very important, that can only be done properly and efficiently, and that includes in the civil service, face to face.
That is a good point, isn't it, Sarah, to be honest? I mean, it's difficult to argue against. If you can't have brainstorming by Zoom, it's just not the same. You're not going to get the same level of bouncing off people because it's quite difficult to sort of interrupt on Zoom, isn't it?
I think arguably you can. There are techniques you can use and packages you can use, but this is not about the whole of the civil service working 5 days a week from home. This is about giving people choice and control over when they come into the office, and the when has to be agreed within the team. So if the team leader knows that they want to do a brainstorming, they say, everyone in on Tuesday, we're working together. I mean, I think that the real issue here, if we're talking about taxpayers and value for money, is there is a huge market at the moment for people moving on. It's called the Great Resignation. Private sector, public sector, it doesn't matter. People are looking for new jobs. And right now, the first question that everybody is asking the recruiters is, does this job offer hybrid working? So if you're a manager in the civil service today and you hear Jacob Rees-Mogg, you are going to be in despair thinking about the impact this is going to have on morale and staff retention. And if you're outside the civil service, you're in commercial sector, you've got skills shortages and vacancies to fill, you're rubbing your hands with glee. You're thinking, here are some highly skilled civil servants, and I can start looking on LinkedIn and headhunting right now because Rees-Mogg has just told them that they're no good, and I know they're good.
This is one of those conversations where I kind of agree with the last person that spoke, which is rather unlike me. But I can see both sides of the argument here. If I was a government minister and I was drafting, I don't know, legislation on safety on ferries, for example, to coin a current phrase, and I wanted to go and speak to the expert person on ferry safety in the Department of Transport, or maybe to have a brainstorming session, I really would want that person to be at their desk that day. Now, wouldn't say, okay, well, we'll do that in 2 days' time. I want to know that answer now. I want to have that discussion now. And so I can see Jacob Rees-Mogg's frustration here. Can you not see that, Sarah?
I can, but I can counter the argument by saying, what if he's in his constituency the day that he wants to speak to that civil servant? You know, you can have one-on-one conversations. I mean, I can think of clients I was working with who said one of the things they really discovered during lockdown was actually very close to ferry safety. It was about lighthouses. And they said, suddenly, we're picking up the phone or the Zoom and we're speaking to colleagues who are not at the next desk. I'm actually speaking to the person who knows what I need to find out. And the whole organisation was becoming much more efficient and effective because of that, because people were using their brains and thinking, who do I really need to talk to, rather than who's at the next desk right now.
Russell, a happy workforce is a motivated and loyal workforce. If enabling people to work 1, 2, or maybe even 3 days a week from home gives you a much more loyal and motivated workforce, what's not to like?
Well, I think that hybrid working is the way forward. It's actually the way that I choose to work. But I don't think that's the issue here. The issue is that...
now the truth is coming out.
No, but because I'm in the luxurious position of working for myself, Ian. So I don't choose to work for the civil service, where ultimately then I would choose to be kind of more told what to do, I guess. But the other thing that we need to consider in the public sector, of course, is that the public sector on average is now paid more than the private sector. Now, that never used to be the case, but of course it is now. And I think public sector workers, if they do insist on staying at home, and again, this whole dynamic here, this issue, is because large swathes of the public sector have refused, if you like, to go back to the office, on a semi-full-time or full-time basis. They should be very, very careful, because I think there'll be a lot of private sector people earning proportionally less, thinking, well, actually, I'll go and do their jobs instead for more money. Your point about being happy and motivated, and that being part of a nice work culture, well, that's also circumvented and applied to the financial incentive too. And I would caution the public sector not to be too glib